Hey, I'm Carl Stoddard, president of Dr. CFO. Today, our podcast guest is Dr. Peter Wishnie out of New York City. And I'm so excited he's taking some time to spend with us today. Peter, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself, a little opener before we get to know you better in your story?
Sure, Carl. First, thanks for having me. I'm a retired podiatrist, retired last year, and I practiced for 34 years, sold my company to private equity 2 years ago, and never worked for anyone. And now I'm full-time business coach for healthcare practitioners.
Okay, perfect. So you said you started 34 years ago. So will that take us to, right?
Well, yeah, 34 years of practice. So I started December 1989.
December 1989. Okay, so did you start as an associate or did you start? Tell me a little bit of your journey.
Sure. Okay. I grew up in New York City, moved to Long Island when I was about 17, went to college there, and then podiatry school in San Francisco. But then after my residency, I bought a practice at the age of 29. My ex-wife at the time said I should never work for anyone. She's right. I give her credit for that. Opened up my own practice. Like a lot of people starting out, struggled, learned my way, grew it, and from there, built it up and sold it 2 years ago. Then I worked for the company for 2 years. And if you never worked for anyone and now you work for someone, it was not easy. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I get that. So I just always started out from day one. And I'll ask you this question too, like, what did you do as a kid to make money? But when I was a kid, I had a paper route at age 8. We washed windows, we mowed lawns, we moved pipe. We didn't make much money doing this, but I like saying it because it's funny. We sold lizards to the neighborhood kids, just whatever we could do to make a buck, But the point is, I always worked for myself. And so there was a period of time where I knew I was going to go off on a 2-year LES mission. And I never really worked for somebody. And I thought, maybe I should know what that's like. So I decided to, while I was doing these other things, to go work for the local grocery store. And that was a good experience. I learned a lot. But that was my first time really ever having a boss like that. And I agree with you. It was kind of a rude awakening, if you will. It was kind of interesting. So what did you do? What did you do as a younger person or a turnabout? What kind of jobs?
As the kid?
Yeah, I love this
stuff. Yeah, so great. I was a camp counselor for a lot of years. I love kids. I always wanted to be a pediatrician at one time.
Okay.
And I also worked at Toys R Us.
Okay.
And in Burger King. And at one time, I sold the Electrolux vacuums door to door.
You did?
And I sold 2 of them. One to a good friend who's a neighbor, and one to my aunt.
That's funny. I have a relative of source. He's been a Kirby salesman. And the only way for him to get off your back was to buy a Kirby. That was the only way, And so it was kind of a funny story. So the reason I think that for a lot of practice owners, I think that what you do as a young person to make money can help you be a much better practice owner. Like when you said you started at age 29, I think having this experience, and out of all these experiences, I know they're all very important, but which one would you say made more of an impact when you started your own business than the other ones?
You mean of those 3 that
Yeah. Those jobs you mentioned.
I think you take something from all of it. To me, the number one skill that you need to have in owning a business, believe it or not, is people skills. You need to be able to deal with a team, staff, employees, deal with customer, client, patient, and dealing with the kids and the parents, and then dealing with the head of the camp. So there's a lot of different people involved. I learned a lot about people skills at camp counselor.
Oh, okay. So the camp counseling thing really was kind of like a doctor in some respects because of how you had to interact with all these different age groups and parents and kids and all that kind of stuff. How long were you a camp counselor for?
Probably a good 6 years.
Wow. Okay. So you did about a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't really have camps like that out west that I'm aware of. I think it's more of a back east. I could be wrong. But
absolutely.
Yeah. But we see the movies, and we always wonder
Dirty Dancing or.
Yeah. Or what's the one where the 2 girls get I forget which one it is. Freaky Friday or something like that. I can't remember. So it's just some business.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we see these camp ones and we don't really have that type of thing that I'm aware of back here in the West. I think this is something, those of you that are older that have your own practices, maybe too late to do this, but if you want your sons or daughters to be practice owners, I would advise you to get them figuring out how to make money today. and how to work with people today, because it's going to give them a lot of leverage over other people in the future. I've had other people I've worked with who, I don't know if I want to necessarily call them silver spoon doctors, but they never really had work. And then all of a sudden they're in practice, and then all of a sudden they have their own practice. And it's like, sure, lucky you, but their people skills are bad. Their managerial skills are bad. Their ability to manage money is bad. They just got thrown at the highest level instead of having to maybe work their way up from the bottom level to a higher level. And I imagine you probably see that when you're out consulting different doctors. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I have also had many different associates in my years, and I've learned to hire what I call the hungry doctor.
Okay.
I got the term from Les Brown. You ever heard of Les Brown, the motivational speaker?
Yeah.
Right. You have to be hungry. He's absolutely right, because if you're spoon-fed, then their work ethic, not that they don't want to work, but their work ethic is totally different than someone who will go the extra mile and just be more creative and learning ways to get a patient better and get more referrals, get more patients to the practice, versus someone that, again, is coming to the practice expecting patients to be fed to that doctor and will do a good job. But not he's a go-getter that when you started in the practice, you ran out and you shook hands and you met people and say, I'm the new guy in town and I'm here to take care of your patients. What would you expect from me? How can I help you with your patients? That kind of rapport back and forth. You don't see that in someone who's definitely spoon-fed. And that happens quite often.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about associate doctors, because if you're a person trying to grow and trying to increase your personal wealth, at some point in time, you probably do need to hire an associate. I can think of a lot of different reasons, but it's not that easy, is it? I mean, it sounds easy. It sounds simple, but it is not easy. So if I was a doctor, you were consulting me, I'm like, okay, I got to go hire an associate. What would you tell me? What would your advice to me be?
Then that's the first thing, is you need to find a hungry person.
Yeah.
You should write down a list of questions you want to ask this person. What are you looking for? So if you are looking for a doctor, I would say to you, call specifically, what are the top 10 characteristics you want in this person that are non-negotiable? These are the 10 things you need. Oh, this person had 9, but not 10. No, these are non-negotiable characteristics. Some of them would be their work ethic and their background and what would they do in different scenarios. And scenarios are a great way to understand how someone thinks. Patient comes in with this problem. How do you work them up? And what would you do for them? What else would you do for them? And you keep on saying, what else? So having those ideas is the first thing. The next thing is I have them come back and shadow me working.
Okay.
I want to see this person, how they interact with the patient. And they come into the treatment room with me. Do they shake hands with the patient? Do they say hello to the patient? Do they really care about the person that's sitting in that treatment chair? Or are they just watching me and not really paying attention to the patient? How do they interact with the staff that I have?
Okay.
They just come in and go, I'm the doctor. You're just the front desk person. But that front desk person has been there for 20 years.
Right.
And you haven't even started. Everybody knows Mary at the front desk. No one knows you.
Right.
In my opinion, Mary's hierarchy is more important than you, even though everyone's equal. And that's the way it's supposed to be. The doctor is not higher up than the person that comes in and cleans the office. And I want to make sure of that. And the third thing is I take this doctor out with his or her significant other, with my significant other. And I want to see the doctor interacting with the waitstaff. How they order. Do they say please? Do they say thank you? Do they open doors for the significant other if it's appropriate? Just how they interact and what kind of people skills they have during that. And what kind of questions are they asking? If they keep on asking, the first thing they ask, how much will I get paid? What are my benefits? And that's all what, matters to them. That's not the right doctor. If they say, how can I contribute to the practice that you build? And how do I get my own patients? What can I do to grow my practice within the practice? That's what I'm looking for. I want somebody who has that mindset that, hey, I built this up and these are my protocols and systems, which I show them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you follow them? So I can't have you come in and change them. The reason why I could afford you is because of my protocols and systems.
Right.
And if you start changing them, you're going to affect the overall profit margins of the practice.
Right.
then I can't keep you.
Right. Okay. This is interesting. So if you're hiring an associate, it is not a simple process with you. I mean, and none of them are, but you're willing to put in some time that you want them to come shadow you in a surgery and see how they interact with the patients. You want to see how they interact with your staff. So I imagine they have to shadow you in the office. And then you want to get a little view into their personal life by seeing how they act by, taking them to dinner or something. So I imagine if you were to interview 10 people, that would take some time. I imagine you probably have some kind of a cheat sheet or some kind of a way to get to the top 3 people a little quicker. What are you things that you look at before you take somebody to kind of like on a date, if you will?
Sure, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So if you have 10 applicants, probably only 2, maybe 3 are worth a dinner.
Okay.
Okay. You really narrow them down quickly. I am looking for an outgoing person. What I can do is train the new doctor on systems and protocols and metrics and let them understand the business side of medicine. I can't train personality. And if they are in every doctor's office, and more today, in an environment where insurances are reducing reimbursements rates every single year, you want someone who has a good personality to be able to sell non-covered services or services that are covered. But hey, Mrs. Jones has a $5,000 deductible. This is covered, but you still have to pay for it because you have a $5,000 deductible. Instead of offering a lesser service, which sounds ridiculous in medicine,
Right.
you always offer what the patient needs. And so you want that kind of personality, someone who's confident in themselves.
Okay.
Right. It doesn't have to be a boisterous person. I've had one of my few best doctors are quiet individuals, quiet, but comfortable and confident. And they can just sit there and they have a presence. And that narrows it down really quick to about, if you have 10, you're getting 2 maybe to go out to dinner.
Interesting. Okay. So I really like that. And I like what you said about the selling side, because I want to come into that, but I think I'm going to ask you a couple more questions on this associate thing, because you mentioned a couple things that took my interest. So I wrote down a couple of notes just so I wouldn't get sidetracked, because I'm very easy about that. So what if somebody's hired an associate? Like I have a client and they have an associate. I feel like they pay their associate too much. And we worked on that to get that to be a more reasonable number. And I asked 2 questions to him about his associate. I go, number 1, because he wants his associate to be maybe the future owner. Okay. And so my question to you, I'm going to tell you this story real quick. And then my question to you is really like, is there you hire an associate to just be an associate and then an associate to be a partner and or future owner? So I asked him 2 questions. I said, number 1, do you trust this person? Do you feel like they have the ability to pay you back? So what I mean by ability to pay you back is, do you feel like they're able to do the selling and all the stuff you mentioned, make enough money to actually buy the practice from you? Okay. So that to me was kind of like one test. The second test is, do you trust them enough that when they make the money, they're actually going to pay you off? Because sometimes if it's a seller finance deal, there's more risk to it than, them getting a loan from the bank. But, a lot of times you can't afford a loan from the bank. It's going to have to be a seller finance deal. So I would like you to speak to that from your experience. Is there a difference if I say I'm hiring my future replacement or I'm hiring a guy to be a partner? What is there a different testing on that?
A little bit. You don't really know until that person starts working with you. And life happens, it's life purely happens. They work with you for a year or 2. Next thing you know, the significant other says, I don't like it here. I don't like this town. Let's just move back home where they originally started, or they just want to move. Like if you're in New York, maybe want to move to Florida where it's warmer or something like that. You never know. And you hire the person that's best suited for that practice now. And you hope that when the student's ready, the teacher peers. So after the young doctor gets acclimated to the everyday workings of the office, then you can say, let's start mentoring you as a mindset to what it takes to be an owner if you're interested. And then you find out they're willing to do that. This is what I also found. And it took a while for me to change my mind on this. People won't act like an owner until they have the responsibility of an owner.
Okay.
And you're getting paid X number of dollars. And all of a sudden I'm working till like 8 o'clock at night doing all the administrative owner work. I want to take that burden off of me and give you some and see what you think. No, you're not paying that doctor to do so. So why would they do it? Right. And until they're actually ready. Now, on an interview, you can ask questions. Are you interested in being owner? And a lot of them will say yes, but it's how they say yes.
Mhm.
And the other thing is a lot of doctors wait too long in their career to say, I want to be out of here in 2 years and
Yeah.
I want to hire tomorrow. And that person has to be the right person. You're better off just assume that that person is not going to be the right person.
That's good. I mean, there's a lot that we can unpack. So I have a client and he had brought in somebody's buddy, basically, to be the next guy that he wants to have be an owner partner. And the way that we did the commission structure, and I learned something because I hadn't experienced somebody not wanting to be hungry yet, to your point earlier. Okay. So usually most people I've been around with, because they have big student loans, that kind of forces them to be somewhat hungry. Well, this guy just wasn't hungry. And I just didn't realize that I needed to put like that in writing. And so what ended up happening is he wanted to be a partner and he was maybe producing, I don't know, maybe the minimum, like 420 a year or something like that was his collections. And so I was like, well, he's got to be closer to the $1 million a year mark to even consider him to be a partner.
Right.
So the owner wanted to let him go and he didn't know how to do it. So I went up for moral support and kind of sat there while we let this guy go. And that was really hard on me, him, especially him, because he's a great guy. And then obviously really hard on that other doctor too. The friendship was over like right then and there kind of permanently, which was sad.
Sure.
So now when people say, well, I want this guy to be my partner or future partner, or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, that's great. And to your point, they've got to pass maybe a couple-year test. They also have to pass the collections test. They need to be able to do, and my number is $1 million. They need to be able to do $1 million a couple of years in a row so that we know that they can answer the question, do they have the ability to pay me back? Because if they can't produce that high. Hey everyone, Carl with Dr. CFO. Hope you're doing well today. I wanted to share with you our new Office Superhero Workbook for 2025. It's not actually just a book. If you're an owner, there's an assignment that your office manager needs to complete in the workbook. And then they return this workbook to you to show you all of the wonderful things that they have done or things that they still need to do to make your practice better. Pick one up, reach out to me, carl@drcfo.com, and we'll get one to you. Thanks and have a great day. Who am I selling my practice to? I'm selling it to somebody that can't pay me back. That's really a high risk situation, right? So
that's a great story for that. Now you say an associate should bring in $1 million is what you say.
that's my test. Yeah. I mean,
So that's fine. About and all specialties or depending on the specialty.
in this case, it's podiatry specific. In podiatry specific, I would say $1 million. Other specialties, maybe they should at least equal what the owner's doing,
Right.
So if the owner is $1 million plus, they need to be 80-90% of what the owner's doing. Otherwise, there's going to be an unequally yoked burden between the two, and one's going to be subsidizing the other, which creates a bad emotional situation between the two. So in this case, I just wanted him to kind of be financially or profession wise equally yoked with the owner. And I don't think $1 million, if I had a guy that was doing 600K, I might say, okay, this guy needs to do 600K to kind of match you. But in this case, I looked at a lot of numbers and hopefully I don't make anybody sad here, but I don't think $1 million is a stretch for a podiatrist to do in a year. I mean, I think more than that, if they're doing grafts and stuff, you can get there really easy, but kind of like your bread and butter podiatry, $1 million is a really big benchmark. That's a big number,
No, I understand. I just also think because of podiatry, depending on the region, some regions, like it's hard to do that as a solo practitioner in your city. Well, if it's an insurance-based practice.
Yes.
But if you're running your practice properly, you can definitely do it. So, yes. But those variables are important because you are selling it to someone. Now, then comes a question, Carl. I need to ask you a question.
Ask me.
Comes up all the time. Comes up all the time. A lot of doctors say,
That's how I keep my hair. Is that what comes up? Okay.
commiserate with their associates saying that, oh, no one could afford to go to the bank and get a loan and pay me, because that's what I did.
Yeah.
When I was 29, I went to a bank. I had a proposal, a 50-page proposal. How I'm going to make money in this practice. Went to 50 different banks. They all looked at me like I'm crazy. The 50 banks gave me money to buy the practice. Most people are not willing to do that or ask the associate to do that. So they evaluate the practice, and over X number of years, they keep on buying in. Now, let me tell you a story about this. My mentor,
Yeah.
read my book, called me up and says he has a problem. And he has an associate that he sold the practice to for like basically nothing per month, but a
Yes.
long, like 15-year period,
Okay.
something like that, right? And then COVID happened. The new owner decided to leave. So she said, I need to move to Florida because I have 4 kids and I need my family to take care of the kids.
Okay.
So the previous owner, who now still works in the office, said to her, can't leave, you own the practice. She said, well, I have to leave and you can sue me. My uncle is a bankruptcy attorney in Iowa. So no problem. Do whatever you have to do. I'm leaving. So meanwhile, there's a couple $100,000 that's he's not going to get paid for, right?
Right.
He calls me up and I said, perfect. It was a great location in New York City. Myself and my associate bought the practice and it was great. But those stories of where the new owner just take that owes a lot of money to the previous owner.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just leave and they go, whatever, sue me. And me, as the old owner, doesn't really want to go to court and get lawyers and waste time and money and paying these, right? So to me, it was always let the young doctor go to a bank and get a loan. What are your thoughts about that, Cole?
Well, if you can get a loan, great. But this is a challenge. So like a podiatry practice, if it's a dental practice, a podiatry practice, and it might be a little bit more global, physical therapy. It kind of depends on what the multiple is. I think when you get into derm and stuff like that, you might be looking at $3, $5, $10 million to buy in to some percentage. And so like it's hard for somebody to get a loan if they've kind of passed that couple year test of working. But there's a way I think that owner could have insured himself a little bit better. Okay. So I don't know how old he was when he sold, but if he had worked there for, let's say, 5 years or during the whole time that this person was buying the practice from him, he could have reduced his risk significantly by staying there, right? So maybe he should have sold a couple years earlier. This is like perfect world stuff. So, I mean, we got to realize perfect world is a perfect world. Because I have clients and I've asked them, in my opinion, to think about age 50, you need to be thinking about selling your practice. By age 55, you better have an associate there that you're going to sell to. By age 60, you probably better be transitioned. By 65, sayonara, you're out. Maybe you will come back and work a day or two a week or something just to make some ad money or whatever, But if somebody waits till they're 60 to start this process or 65, wow, that makes it hard. We looked at a practice in kind of a general practitioner practice to buy a really super talented. Now, actually, this was an interesting dynamic because it wasn't podiatry, but this guy had a ton of a very unique, awesome general practice experience. He had experience that nobody could duplicate, which was awesome for him, not awesome for us because we couldn't duplicate it. Like he goes, well, I forget where he worked, but it was like Chicago or something. See all these cases that you're not going to see in Utah. And I'm like, well, that's great for you, but he was selling was an asset, and resume builder for him was actually a risk for us. And if I remember right, he was like 74, 75. And I'm like, that's a risk too. And he wanted a high number for his practice because I don't know what it is. Sometimes I swear it's like this where Utah mentality where their consultants are like telling them what their practice is worth. We had a guy tell us once that his consultant said his practice was worth like 25 times dividend. And I'm like, I don't even know how to talk to you. That's such a ridiculous number. I don't even know how to talk to you now because we are like 20x apart, maybe 22x apart. And so that was a problem too. But this older gentleman, I really felt bad for him because he wanted to move on and his wife was quite a bit younger than him and he's not going to be around forever. And he wanted to work till he died. He could tell, but it was just time and he had not given himself time to sell. And I had seen something similar with another guy I worked with where he sold out and he waited too long as well. And I think he was close to 70. And we were trying to get him to sell, but he wouldn't do it. And then when push comes to shove, he goes to sell. And in this case, it was a hospital group and they had they knew it. They kept just lowering the number. They basically stole the practice from him. It was kind of powerless to help him at that point because he had already, stabbed himself in the back by waiting too long. And so I guess my question to you, and I kind of, maybe I'll ask your question initially, but like, what are your thoughts on that? What's the right age? I mean, you just sold out. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
No problem. 64, be 65
Okay.
in July. I was 62 when I sold. and I had multiple reasons to do so. One was private equity came and gave me a great figure,
Nice.
and I didn't know when that was going to happen again.
Yeah.
My longevity on the male side of my family history is not great. My father died at 59 and his father died at 62. Plus, I have this other passion like you, helping other physicians with their business. So we combine all that and it works out great. I know a lot of people, I was at a conference this weekend, people in their 70s still love to practice. And that is great. You should be able to, at that age, practice the way you want to. You want to work 3 days a week, 2 days a week. You want to take off a week every quarter, however you want to practice. Set it up so you have the freedom to do whatever you want. It might be okay if some people just want to work and don't care if they sell it or not. They don't need to and just shut the doors. Then just make sure you have enough money put away. And that's the great thing about owning your practice. You do whatever you want.
Yeah. I feel like if you own a practice, that's like a weird angle to take. I get that people take it, but so you basically hit the timeline. 64, you were out, and 62 years old, 64. Because didn't you say you had to work 2 more years afterwards? As part
Correct.
of the
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And then you hit that age mark. You kind of came into the last second, stole third base there, and was able to make a score. But the timeline is the timeline for a variety of reasons. I mean, you look like you keep yourself in really good shape, but the odds are the odds, I guess. So we just all have to kind of think about those, unfortunately. And when you're young, you just think you're like invincible.
Yes.
And then you realize, I got a cold. What's that joke about the mad cold or something? But, it's like, oh, I'm out because I got a cold. So that's true. There was another question I wanted to ask you, and I don't want you to tell me about yours, but just in general, if somebody's buying a private practice podiatry group, what are you seeing them go for? Is either a multiple on EBITDA or a percentage of collections? What are you kind of seeing?
Sure. If it's private equity, they are doing multiples of EBITDA, and that's usually between 3 and 5, maybe some practices up to 6. Nothing more than that.
So private equity, you're saying 6 is the max.
6 is the
That's
max.
that's interesting.
I had none
Okay,
that.
that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah. Because everybody's saying go 10. If you're an orthopedic practice, you're going 10, 15, probably something like that, depending on, obviously, the profit margin.
Yeah.
I had my practice evaluated a couple of times, thinking I had 5 associates at once, and or maybe 2 or 3 would buy in, and I spent a lot of money getting evaluated. And no matter how they do it with their calculations or whatever, it always comes up with, think what you made over the last couple of years and divided by 2. And that's what another doc will buy it for.
Well, I kind of laugh about that. So we call that the cowboy math method, which I've worked in some really big companies. And you're right. These guys do this, because my background is I have an accounting degree, MBA, all that stuff. Worked with a lot of different database stuff. And so what ends up happening is these guys do like this detailed analysis. And at the end of the day, this is what I'm going to pay you for it. Do you want it or not? It's literally like writing it on a napkin. So I do evaluations for people too. I only charge like $1,200, depending on how long it takes me to get the data. But I've seen some of these valuations from these firms, and I don't want to say they're bad, but they're bad because they're kind of hard to follow and they're not really common sense. And they're not really set up for how the deal's going to go through anyway. So mine are set up to know because I know it's going to be a cowboy deal at the end of the day. And it's like, can you defend this percentage of collections or something? So to take this in point, I was just looking at a property this morning, believe it or not. It wasn't a medical practice, but they wanted, I think, about $2.2 million. Now it's real estate, so maybe that's a little different, but the cash flow on it was like $32,000 or something here. I was like, I take forever to pay that off, with the current cash flow. It's kind of a fixer-upper, so I'm thinking it's not worth whatever they're saying. I would never pay that because I'd have to put a lot of money into fixing it up. And so I think you're right about that. I mean, I think we would probably value an active practice somewhere selling to a private person a 3 to 4x, which if they're doing 20% EBITDA, which is a high number for podiatry. Okay, so that would put you at 60% of collections. It's probably going to be lower than that, somewhere between 30 and 50% of collections. Because I noticed that podiatrists, they just have a harder time making a profit margin than, say, dermatology or something like that, And I think there's a lot of reasons why. I would say number one is, so a lot of them have moved from TrackNet to modernizing medicine.
Yes.
And it just so happens that I have a ton of dermatologists also on modernizing medicine. And I know that the podiatry world has pitched a fit, at least some of the people I've talked to have pitched a fit about modernizing medicine because it is much more complicated than track that. I think it's way better, but it's kind of like you get out of it what you put into it. And the dermatologists have this money to throw at this thing so they can get a lot out of modernizing medicine. And it has helped them. Okay. And the reporting in modernizing medicine is phenomenal from my point of view. However, my podiatrists don't have the same dollars as far as staff members and time and energies to throw into modernizing medicine. So they're not getting the same return. So there's that. The other thing I see in some of the practices is, I'm trying to think of how to say this nicely, but like people discount the amount of talent it takes to do bookkeeping correctly. Well, 9 times out of 10, the office manager doesn't. That's absolutely the wrong person to do it. Sometimes the owner does it and they do it and however way they want to do it. Right. And then sometimes the amount of commingling, and I don't care if somebody commingles personal stuff with all that. I don't care about that. I'm trying to figure out what your profit is and you do that. I don't know how to do it. So I just met with a guy recently who wants to sell his practice to another client of mine. And the profitability was basically zero. So I sat down with him and we went through the P&L line by line by line. He goes, yeah, probably this much a month, probably this much. And so after I was done, I think I was able to get a profitability of it somewhere around 15%. I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty reasonable to me. I wouldn't expect you to do much better than that. If he would have said, no, I'm doing all this and the profitability came out to be 30%, I'd be like, I know that's not right, especially on a smaller collections number. And so the other thing I've seen, and you kind of hit to this a minute ago or earlier in a conversation, is you think, oh, I'm in awesome New York. I'm going to make a killing, How can I not? It's New York. Well, this is why you're not.
This podcast is sponsored by Snake River Payroll, your hassle-free solution to all payroll needs. With fast, reliable service, they take care of your payroll so you can focus on what matters most. Visit srstaff.net today. Snake River Payroll, payroll made simple.
Your staff is expensive. Your rent is expensive. And guess what? You're not getting paid much more than the guy that's in Podactville.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely correct.
And so the guy in Podactville, maybe he doesn't get to go to fancy restaurants. Maybe he doesn't get to go to all the sports games, but he's making a ton of money. And if he learns to cook, learns to do outdoor stuff, he might be ahead of you, because it's a different metric. So getting seduced with the big city, you got to be careful with that. But then that comes back to your other point, which is you have to sell products and services that insurance don't cover. Okay. So you're my podiatry consultant. What are you telling me I need to sell my podiatry? What should I be doing?
Yeah, my office in New York that we have, because I practiced in New Jersey for all the years. And my practice in New York, we did tons of orthotics, obviously.
Yes.
Then laser therapy for nail fungus and for pain.
Okay.
Non-surgical procedures we could do in the office that was cash.
Okay.
And then I do fat fillers for the bottom of the foot for something called metatarsology. When people are thinning up the skin underneath the ball of their feet, we put fat fillers in there.
I like that.
Regenerative medicine, stem cell injections for partially torn tendons or chronic pain. So there's a lot we can do, especially now. That's the problem that has to be corrected. It's not a business problem. It's a mindset problem.
I agree.
My patients overrate. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose patients and things like that. If you go back to old school, remember the show like Dr. Kildare?
Yeah.
Right. And spend the time, the quality of time showing compassion to your patients and educate them. People are people. They want that. They will pay for that. And especially they are paying for it already because they have all these high deductibles and co-pays. They're already paying out of their pocket for not optimum medical care.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, gosh, I haven't seen this too much with my podiatrists, but I've seen it. I'm going to give you a couple examples. Okay. So many, many years ago, I was working with a family practice and I suggested to them that they should do some, like they were just like all in on whatever insurance said was the gospel. That's it. And I said, well, maybe we need to do some other stuff. And that guy looked at me like, obviously you're not a very devout person. It's kind of how he was acting about it, And I was thinking, oh, you're not a very smart person. you don't understand. And then I had another guy I was working with, and this is kind of an angle of what you're saying. I kind of have this thing where I chart out how much time we're spending with different insurance payers. And when you start out, you're probably taking the lowest payers, but hopefully over time, as you grow your practice, you're moving into more self-pay and higher payers. And so I suggested to this person, you probably are seeing too much Medicaid. And he's like, Carl, you don't know why I got into this business. I got in this business to help people. He's like, yell at me. I'm like, oh, I think I made a mistake here. And so I just let it go and didn't bring it up again because I really had a sensitive spot. Well, I don't know if it was the next month or a couple months later. He says, you know what, Carl, I've decided I'm going to see less Medicaid people. And I was like, okay, that's fantastic. But he said it like it was his own idea. Like I never said anything. I'm like, you know what? What do they say? Flattery is the greatest thing. I will take it. Because this can help you work on your this.
Carl, do you have children?
Yeah, I have 5 actually.
Okay, so you know that you could tell your child something and they'd say, no, they don't listen to you. They go to school and come back. You know what my teacher told me? And you go, I wonder where you heard that from.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, they need to hear it. We're no different. We're just bigger children. We need to hear it, process it. Some people process it quicker than others, but eventually the pain becomes so great. They go, I think I need to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He and I have had a lot of kind of interesting conversations, and he's working hard on another thing that we had brought up for years and years and years. And finally, he's taking action on it. I'm so happy for him because it's going to be a big deal for him. But yeah, sometimes I feel like I am just kind of beating myself in the head. It's like low-hanging fruit, but okay, yeah, I'm not a genius to bring this up. But the point is if we don't address this, you're going to have a problem. And then one of those problems, actually, I want to talk about the retail thing. I'll go back to that in just a second. But I don't know if this is the single biggest problem I see in podiatry, but it probably is pretty close. And one of them is the accounts receivable. They are notorious with having terrible accounts receivable. And I don't see that in Durham that much. And the other thing I see, and it's kind of related, is collecting, and you've hit on this with the high deductibles, right? So high deductible infers that I have to collect a time of service. And if I don't know what they're going to owe me, I better give it my best college guess to figure out what that number is. Because if I don't collect it right then and there, the odds of me collecting it later are low. So I need to collect it. And this sounds really, but I get to be they're the compassion provider. So I get to be the finance guy right now and say, look, I have to collect the money when they're in pain. Because once they're not in pain anymore, they might not pay me. I have to get the money at the most opportune time. And of course, being the great finance guy, I'll get to see it now. And so I actually had to go into an office, and the office was like, hey, Carl, we don't have any money. And as a consultant, that made me feel terrible. And so we ended up doing some practicing over the phone and practicing collecting at time of service. And it was such a simple fix because the employees weren't used to asking for the money. So I pretended like I was the patient and made them ask for the money, like on the phone call. I just pretended like I was that guy and just made them ask like 5 or 6 or 7 times. And just that simple thing. It's not that they couldn't do it. They just weren't used to hearing themselves say it. They just had to ask for the money. And I've heard people say to me, well, the reason you're really good at collecting is because you have an accounting degree and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, that has nothing to do with it. The reason I'm really good at collecting is because I had a paper out for 5 years and I had to go collect the money. And lady, I need my $5. Sorry, your husband has to check. I want to ask another question too. Okay, so these top services, I have a tool called the pricing model. Okay, so your laser, all these auxiliary services that provide at the podiatrists, if they're not doing, they should be doing. Okay, so all the stuff you're telling them to do, if they're not doing it, please do it. It's just in your best interest. So this pricing tool will allow them to put in all their, like say they charge $100 for this thing. It allows them to put in their direct costs and come up with a margin. Okay. And so the margin I kind of look for, it's called the contribution margin, somewhere between 60% is my low. I prefer a little bit higher, maybe 70% margin, because then I have other staff, I have marketing, I have facilities, I have the administration. They're going to eat that up. So when you see the 70%, that isn't my profit that I take home. That just kind of gets me to a point to pay for all these other things.
Absolutely.
And somebody might say, well, I make a good margin on them, so I don't need, I go, well, some of these products got to pay for those other things. You can't just like take a loss on all of them. So And you know anybody interested in that tool, I'd be happy to show it to them. It's called,
Well, they're great. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
it's called our pricing model.
I like to see that. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have to do that sometime. The other thing I wanted to tell you, and I wanted your impression on this. So I have a doctor. He has a really, really low APC. We're talking like 60, $70. That's as low as I've ever seen. And I didn't know how to address it because like you said, it was a mindset thing. Okay. It's almost like he felt he didn't deserve. I almost felt like he thought, well, I'm here to help all these people. It's primarily Medicaid. It's actually a different provider. Here to help all these different Medicaid people. And I learned something from him that I had never thought I was going to learn. And that was that sometimes when you're working with a population that doesn't care about the success of their results, you as a provider don't get to see the success you deserve. And so mentally it plays a trick on your mind and you think you're a bad client. So let's say you see a Medicaid patient, you do this unbelievable surgery on them. And then the next day they step on their foot, do anything. And they don't care. And you just were the Michelangelo in there doing this thing and they don't care about what you did. Even though you made money off it, there's something beyond money that providers need to help them feel good, to give them that pat on the back, that warm pussy that I know we're very good on. And so sometimes if you work with the wrong population too much, it messes with your mind. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I don't care what population you work with. That I call it RPV, revenue per visit, is way too low. You have to, for the number you also need to know is how much does it cost to treat a patient?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's $70 and you're bringing in 60, you're losing money. And if you keep on doing that, you'd be out of business in no time. So that if you own a business, and you have to have a little business sense too.
Yeah.
Usually I don't find the problem being the population. I find it's a mindset that the doctor just gives the patient bare minimum to get what they want. Like they prejudge the patients. That's the problem.
Okay.
My patients that are medicated and are paying for more out of cash services than people that came in with a Mercedes. You know, people want to do something. They're in pain. And what does that pain prevent them from doing? It prevents them from running, playing their grandchildren, going to work. You know, they're on their feet all day long and their feet hurt. The quality of life. And you have to take them on a journey from like, hey, Mary, your pain is this. And I know you want to play with your grandkids and it's hurting you and you get compassion and empathy and you really feel it because you're that kind of doctor. We can do this. It's an attitude. It's being confident in yourself and services and having enough in your toolbox to treat the patient differently than the next patient, having everything you need that the patient can actually say yes to some recommendation. As soon as that doctor gets resistance, they say, okay, they eventually down the road probably don't offer high-end services and they just keep all the services low-end because they're on Medicaid and they can't afford it. Your job as a doctor to provide care to that patient and the proper care to get them better quickly as possible because it's cheaper for them. It's cheaper for everyone. They're happier. And it's up to the patient to say, I can afford it or I can't. It's not your job to prejudge your patients.
Okay. I like that. I have a couple more questions I want to ask you.
And here's the thing. I would love to do so, but I need a 1:00 appointment.
Okay. I guess I need to let you run.
Yeah, I love this.
So to be continued. Cliffhanger, everyone.
Okay.
Cliffhanger here. Look out for part 2 with Dr. Peter Wishnie.
I think it was a great call. I love talking this. I could do this all day.
Great. Thank you. Me too. Take care. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Bye.